Spending the day or the morning here and being interested in food. Food is this huge topic of discussion, so I think part of the challenge in a situation like this is just trying to figure out what to say. You've got everybody from Anthony Bourdain to Michael Pollan to Thomas Keller to great speakers that slice and dice this topic all day long, and they do a great job. So I don't want to even try to compete with that, so we're not going to be going into any topics related to those kind of larger trend issues. What I really want to get into today, since we are in Pittsburgh and we are in Bar Marco, which is such a great representation of where we've come, I'd rather just talk a little bit about us, the locality of our food, the community and economic development that has occurred in the last decade and what role food has played. And again, the reinvention is not just about food itself, but it's about us as a culture and as a community and as a city overall. So what I really want to do is take a little bit of a flashback to when we first started Table Magazine. I don't know, does everyone here know what Table is? Because I can give you a quick update. But we're a quarterly publication that's been around for about 8 years. And yes, we are a food magazine, but we like to touch on a lot of topics related to, again, the intersections of food in our community and in many ways that I hope are unexpected and interesting. But that was 8 years ago when we actually published our first issue in 2006. But leading up to that, and probably a decade ago, the real reason that that product came to be was because of my own personal frustration. I was 28 years old. I had gone to school here at Pitt. I had stayed. I had lived in Squirrel Hill and just kind of churned in the social scene in Pittsburgh for quite some time. And the number one thing that just kept coming up among kids my age, frankly, kids at the time, it felt that way in my mid-20s, was, especially in Pittsburgh when the average age is a little higher, was there's nothing to do in Pittsburgh. Nothing to do. Nowhere to go, nowhere to eat, nothing to do. We don't have great restaurants. It's boring. You either go to the clubs or you go to the bars or whatever. And there was a lot of disgruntlement. There was a lot of negativity. Spent a lot of hours at the squirrel cage, drinking beer, smoking cigarettes, complaining that there's nothing to do. So obviously we weren't going to find it there. But the attitude was really the more important thing. It was a lot of negativity. And some of that still lingers today in the sense that I think people outside of our market are still bigger cheerleaders for Pittsburgh than we are for ourselves. And what I want to kind of address when it relates to food is that is so much more damaging than you can ever imagine. So we're looking about 10 years ago, and I got frustrated because I was having fun with food. I had set up this little East End supper club thing, which was 12 of my best friends, and we all lived in the East End, and we cooked for each other every month, and it was fun, and there were all these great little restaurants and lots of ethnic places to explore, and I thought, this is great. Why aren't we talking about this? Why is there negativity? Why aren't we moving beyond the expected, which at the time was still a very dated perception of food? It was still the pierogies, the permanis, the red pop, the pretzel jello salad, and this fatty, deep fried crab cakes thing. And I thought, this is really damaging. And I was in marketing and communications, which I still am. I was in the agency side of the business back then. And I thought, I'm going to just do a little bit of research and find out what this is all about. And what I found is in other markets that are considered food towns, what a bonus that really is. It's not just that they have good restaurants. I mean, with good restaurants comes jobs, and comes neighborhood development, and comes community and economic development in a way that you really can't measure. It's not just food. It's not just, do we have good places to eat? Do we have good places to have a handshaking cocktail? That is just the bait. Food as a vehicle for transformation is much more tied into our community and our economic viability than I think most people appreciate. So to have a negative attitude about it is incredibly harmful, because a lot of restaurants, really good ones, really good ideas and great people, were trying to get started in this environment 10 years ago and not succeeding. There were a lot of failed efforts. There was a lot of really big flash and then not much sustainability, and that was because the perception, the people we weren't there. We weren't willing to accept the newness of those things at the time. And in part, what I want to get into is that had to do with shame. We had this attitude, or we did, that it was too good for us. Something is too good for Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's not worthy of X. It might be a really fancy restaurant, but it's never going to work because this is Pittsburgh. And that is, really, again, part of the platform from which we started Table was to say, yeah, this is Pittsburgh. We are in the middle of southwestern Pennsylvania, which is one of the biggest growing states in the country. It's our industry. It's the number one industry in our state is agriculture, and number two is tourism. So how come all these other people seem to be figuring out that growing food, selling food, and entertaining people from other parts of the country or other parts of the state seems to be a good idea? And again, it was the psychology of our social structure at the time and our willingness to accept that was really holding us back. So I want to start with that, which is shame, and that's why I have the hamster wheel. Just a little bit of background. I hate PowerPoint. I hate it. I'm like, there's very little, I don't like looking at it, I don't like using it, no offense, that was only like 4 slides, so I'll forgive you. But I'm convinced that it was designed by like Nazi scientists to, warp our brains or something, because there's the process, just whatever. This is a hamster wheel because in my mind at the time, we were spinning our wheels, we weren't going anywhere, we were negative, we were having this conversation, again, more and more nights at the squirrel cage, more and more beers and cigarettes, and more of that same, negativity among people at my age, which was incredibly damaging because it was the whole brain drain thing. People were leaving. And it wasn't, if I left, it wouldn't be much of a brain drain. But I stayed because I wanted to, root myself here and talk about what I thought was positive. So the reason shame comes up is because I think Pittsburgh was always this kind of, I wasn't born and raised here. I was born and raised in Idaho and then since moved here and then obviously stayed. So I think it takes a little bit of an outside perspective to identify how negative that attitude really was. And I think it's based on, coming from 2 generations ago of, flopped economy, failed industry, loss of jobs, loss of momentum, neighborhoods burning out, this, that, and whatever. But really, it wasn't where we were, but we were just bringing all that with us. And there was a lot more positive stuff on the surface that I really wanted to talk about. And that shame will just perpetuate lack of productivity, lack of growth, lack of progress. And so Table really started to say, let's change the conversation and put some stuff out there that people may not expect or know about Pittsburgh. And it worked. I mean, we got an advisory board of some progressive thinkers, and we decided that it was worth taking a shot. And at the time, it was just one of those chances. I just thought, okay, if this works, it works. If it doesn't, I lose my house. It's like, it wasn't a huge gamble, but it was one of those things where I thought, if I don't do this, nobody is, because everyone else I was talking to was saying, Pittsburgh won't do this. They won't buy into it, which was an interesting exercise to be told over and over and over again, this is too good, nobody's going to get it. And luckily we persevered. We got through the first 4 issues and continued to make a little bit of money, enough to at least continue to produce. And I was incredibly lucky because while we were kind of etching away at our philosophy there, other things started to catch up. And don't assume that it's just because cool people had cool ideas and now we've got all these great restaurants. It was a total groundswell and mind shift in Pittsburgh from this socioeconomic and whatever you want to call it, psychology of spinning to having these glimmers of hope. And whether or not it was coming from education and CMU or whether or not it was coming from some of our leadership and healthcare and technology or wherever, we started to change as a culture, and food was just part of it. And food, in some cases, leads that charge. Like, hey, a great new restaurant opens in Lawrenceville, so now people are going there. Well, that means other things too. That means that now retail establishments can survive. That means that other businesses want to go there as well. But it's not an independent action. It's all interconnected, because without the acceptance, there's no sustainability. You could have the best restaurant in the country in Lawrenceville on Butler Street, but if people aren't willing to go there and spend the money and accept that it's a good idea for them and for the city, it won't last. So I like to think about Table being kind of part of that transition, or at least having the opportunity to bring some of that to the surface and really get to a greater state of acceptance. And this is my visual aid for acceptance, which is, getting in the car with other people and pointing it in a forward direction and knowing that you are, moving and progressing in a way that is positive. Because with that comes innovation and opportunity to think creatively about what's next. One of the things that I think is really important about acceptance is it leads us into this topic of the socioeconomic stresses that a lot of people bring to the surface when it comes to food. Do people with lower income status have access to good food? And how does that relate to our community at large? And one of the things that is a frustration for me is that people will say, oh, it's just because they don't have enough money, they can't get the right food. And that's not true. I think there's obviously an education barrier there, and there's an acceptance barrier, because when you look at the shame issue, a lot of our inner city families and kids being brought up in this multi-generational perpetuation of poverty have so much shame and do not believe that they're worthy of good food. I have a friend named Francis who's an amazing artist who runs a program in Manchester, and it's called Hold Up in the Hood. And the kids take a white piece of construction paper or board, and they make collages of their heads, of the things that they want to show to the world, or the way they want to be seen, kind of expressions of self done in these collages. And then what they do is they hold up the card, and so their little bodies are underneath, but the head is comprised of what they want people to see. And 9 times out of 10, these collages are made of things that the kids don't have. The bumper of a Mercedes, or some beautiful woman with great hair, or if they're black, it's a white person. If they're white, it's a black person, or whatever it is. They construct these images in a way that represents, in many cases, what they want to be but aren't. And he said an interesting percentage of kids will make those faces out of food, but not just any food, not McDonald's cheeseburgers, but like fresh food. The hair is broccoli, the eyes are cucumbers, the neck is like chicken or whatever. And the reason is because that's good food. And I've actually heard, it's amazing what you listen to when you care about food as much as I do, and a lot of the people that we work with do. I've actually heard mothers direct their kids away from fresh food or away from healthy food, saying, that's not for you. Cheetos are for you, McDonald's is for you. They're not saying this, but I'm just projecting this at this point. The negative, the bad food is for you because that's what you're used to and that's what we've always done. But I've actually had moms at farmers markets where the kids are walking by the farmers market reaching out for tomatoes, pull them away from the farmers market. And I'm thinking, that's an opportunity for exploration, but unfortunately they're creating that ceiling and creating that feeling of shame and that feeling of unworthiness that, again, you don't deserve that. And so I think with Pittsburgh, we really got to the point where we needed to even just tell ourselves we do deserve good things. And so once that acceptance takes place, all these other great ideas take root because we now have people that are willing to support us, And I say us because with Table, that was a big deal. We probably wouldn't have made it through we made it through the first few years, but that was just, scrapping basically. But once we really started to take root, it was because people had a greater acceptance for this conversation. And that relates to our socioeconomic discussion about, how much access people have to good food, because foundations then have acceptance, and funders and lenders and banks have acceptance. So now there's all these foundations that are giving great money to food projects. There's, like the Braddock Food Project, and there's, other community gardens and various things that are bringing it even closer to the people who need it the most. And they're creating jobs, and they're creating exposure and that connection to the community. So with that, again, with that acceptance comes the opportunity for the connection, and takes away that division that everyone says is so obvious, whether it be economic or whether they think it's a social strata thing. I think it's more of a psychological thing myself and an education thing, and really just kind of removing those barriers to entry for the people who need it the most. So that acceptance part, I think, is kind of where we are, allowing us to be unique and allowing us to say it's okay who we are. We don't have to be anybody else. For years and years it was like, are we going to be the next Portland? Are we going to be the little New York? Are we going to be the what are we? Well, we're Pittsburgh. It's a unique culture. It's a unique environment. We have all this great stuff, again, growing locally that's not, growing in Portland, frankly. But when we compare ourselves to other people, I think we really lose that momentum. And in order for us to be truly innovative, we need to just accept who we are and be proud about it and be excited and say nice things, frankly. And the way that compares to 10 years ago, which I love, is that this conversation has changed. You know, the things that people are saying about food in our city are great. It's creating so much opportunity. It's creating so much enjoyment. It's creating a whole new personality for the way people experience Pittsburgh. You know, people come here from other markets and just love it, and they rave about it. They're some of our biggest cheerleaders, and I think we've started to kind of take on a little bit more of that ourselves. And it's a very important conversation to make sure that, you know, it continues. So after acceptance, I guess the third stage that I want to talk about is innovation. And that's, I have Tinkerbell here because to me, now based on where we are, innovation is really going to take the form of some very kind of magical and very you know, fantastic ideas. We're getting a lot smarter with what we do. The next big innovation isn't going to be a new restaurant. It's not going to be, you know, a chef who has a garden. All these things are already being done because it's now part of our culture, part of our dialogue. The next innovation is going to be something that helps to, again, continue to make those connections between food and the community, food and the economy, food in our lives, so that we can continue to build upon what we've started. I think that even like some of what Bobby and his team do here are examples of that connection. They don't just make good food and make great drinks, they connect with school lunch programs. They connect with, you know, health and wellness issues related to kids and our community. That is where innovation really lives, because only with that connectivity is it going to be as sustainable and as meaningful as we need it to be as a city and as kind of a community. And I just think it's funny because you read about trends in like the international food magazines, or you see things coming out of New York, and people are trying to get so squirrely with what makes for unique food experience. You know, some chef has like a, you know, cow in his backyard, and it's only milked by Hungarian virgins, and they make you know, cheese out of it that they serve with, you know, crackers that are milled by, you know, Ethiopian children or something. I don't know. But that stuff is interesting, but I think unfortunately it clouds the bigger issues. You know, it's the Food Network and the fancy stuff, and then, you know, just take it to the next level kind of thinking. It's entertaining and it's fun, but I think our focus locally is so much more ingrained. I mean, it's almost like a natural thing for us, I think, for Pittsburghers to think more about, you know, the community and, you know, what's really going on and what's important to us, and leave the flash kind of where the flash belongs to be, and really start to, again, make those connections the next innovation, and keep us kind of in a very authentic pattern. So that generally is what I want to say. I don't know if it's long enough or too long, but I think it's cool, because if we look at our past and we say, okay, we're beyond that, we don't ever have to go back there. I mean, that's the great thing about progress. I mean, Pittsburgh is not going to, the bottom's not going to fall out, and then all of a sudden we're back on the hamster wheel. And I do believe that this whole, you know, acceptance thing has taken root amazingly well. I mean, when you look around and you see how many young people are excited about food ideas, and how many, you know, even just having the joy of being part of the magazine, you know, we get to see firsthand how much this acceptance really has taken root. And again, not just because it's popular, not just because it's fancy or fun, but because it's become a much more natural part of our discussion, and a much more positive part of our discussion, which I love. And this innovation thing I'm very excited about, because that's where the creativity lies, and that's where the smartest people win, frankly. Because if you can make those connections and do it in a meaningful way, I think we're all about 2 degrees of separation from the next big idea that's going to be really, you know, important for food, whether it be a nutritional, you know, nutrition related or program related, or somehow, you know, helping our kids come up in a way that is more logical and kind of beats the system. These are not easy tasks. I mean, people are trying like crazy. I mean, Michelle Obama's trying like crazy. Everybody's got their own way of addressing the issues of what's most important to us when it comes to food. So I'm excited to see what's next, and I think each of us kind of plays a role in that. So definitely supporting your businesses, going to restaurants, telling people about it. I mean, it just, to me, it's funny. Someone said to me the other day, did you go to the Best Restaurants party? And I said, no, I didn't. And, it's not sour grapes. It's not because I don't like Pittsburgh Magazine. I think Pittsburgh Magazine's great. I think Betsy's great. It's good for the city. But I think what's kind of bad in those instances is because it's not about what the top 10 restaurants are. I mean, to me, that's superfluous. It's more about where you're spending your money. A lot of those contests are for reasons that obviously help to sell magazines and sell advertising, but the most important thing to those businesses is that you go and you spend money and you come back and you bring other people, because there have been some best restaurants in Pittsburgh that 3 years ago were considered best restaurants or best chefs that aren't in business anymore. And again, that's where the acceptance takes place. You have to say, not only do I think this is a good place, I'm going to help to sustain this community. So that is what I have to say today about food, and I hope it wasn't too heady. I didn't have any blindfolded cold press olive oil tastings or anything, but you can definitely find that about 5 times a week in the city now, which is amazing. So thanks for your time.